The diplomatic summit ended in blood. The blast tore through the grand chamber in a cascade of flame, metal, and bone, vaporizing the trillion envoy mid-sentence and sending shockwaves through the orbiting spire. Yelena Vostrikov didn't flinch. Her eyes, cold as Arctic ice, narrowed as the heat singed her cheeks. Screams echoed. Smoke coiled into the chamber's vaulted ceilings, thick with the iron tang of alien blood. They had tried to kill her. Amid the chaos, she moved, not like a diplomat, not like a soldier, but like something older, sharper, forged in shadow and fire. Her hand shot out, snatching a jagged shard of crystallized glass from a shattered table. A reptilian guard lunged for her, his pulse rifle half raised, but she was already there, driving the shard into his throat, twisting. Black blood sprayed in a sizzling arc. He collapsed at her feet, convulsing. She didn't look down. The second assassin, cloaked in shimmering adaptive armor, aimed a plasma pistol at her chest. She pivoted low, using the dying guard's body as a shield. The pistol flared. The corpse spasmed. Yelena sprang forward, driving her shoulder into the assassin's midsection, slamming him into a pillar with bone-cracking force. A sharp twist, and she yanked the pistol from his hand, firing point-blank into his face. Silence fell, thick and unnatural. Only the flickering flames crackled, and the dying moans of those foolish enough to believe Earth had come here to negotiate. Yelena stood tall amid the carnage, her suit scorched, her face smeared with soot and blood, eyes unreadable. She touched the comm embedded in her neck. "Earth Command," she said, voice low, steady. "The Empire has declared war." Static crackled in response, then a sharp reply. "Understood, Ambassador. Extraction en route." She turned, stepping over twisted corpses, her boots leaving faint prints in blood and ash. Around her, surviving delegates, alien dignitaries and neutral observers, cowered behind overturned tables and crumbling columns. Many stared at her, not with relief, but with terror. Let them stare. Let them remember. The Galactic Empire had made a fatal error. They mistook her for a diplomat. They didn't realize they had awoken the Baba Yaga. Far above the station, the Empire's flagship loomed, a crescent-shaped behemoth of obsidian metal and void light, bristling with weapons. From its bridge, High Chancellor Tormek watched the carnage on the view screen. His advisors chattered nervously in their native tongues, watching the lone Terran woman cut down his elite assassins like children. "Impossible," Tormek hissed. She was unarmed. "She is Terran, Chancellor," his aide said, voice trembling. "They're kind, especially this one. They're not like us." He slammed his fist on the console. This wasn't supposed to happen. The human delegation was meant to be eliminated, their homeworld to submit in fear. One strike, one message. That was the plan. And now, the aide asked, voice barely above a whisper. Tormek stared at the screen as Yelena stepped into the evacuation corridor, head high, eyes locked on a surveillance drone. He felt something cold crawl up his spine. Now we burn Earth to the ground. The extraction vessel broke through the station's debris field minutes later. Inside, Yelena sat alone in the rear compartment, cleaning blood from her hands with a worn cloth. Her eyes stared ahead, unfocused, as memories flickered like ghosts. She had known this would happen, not the ambush itself, though she'd anticipated betrayal, but the inevitability of war. Earth's ascension, its arrival on the galactic stage, had always been an offense to the Empire's sense of supremacy. Humanity had been silent for too long, building, watching, waiting. And she, Yelena Vostrikov, had been waiting longer than anyone. She looked down at her hands. Scars mapped her knuckles, old and faded, each one a story, a lesson, a kill. The galaxy feared the unknown, the unpredictable, and nothing terrified them more than humans who had stopped running. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Ambassador, we're approaching the relay point. Orders from command. Rendezvous with the fleet. She stood, holstering the stolen plasma pistol at her hip. Patch me through to General Kessler. Moments later, the holographic form of the general appeared in the compartment, flickering with interference. His face was grim, eyes dark with the weight of what was to come. They struck first, he said without preamble. They failed, Yelena replied. He nodded slowly. You're the last survivor. We're activating Protocol Nix. She raised an eyebrow. Total war. Correct. We've mobilized the Valkyrie fleet. Terra's orders are clear. Cripple the Empire before they can regroup. She didn't smile. Smiling was for those who believe in mercy. I'll need full control of Black operations, she said. No oversight. You have it. What's your objective? She met his eyes. I want the Empire's High Chancellor alive. Kessler frowned. For interrogation? For display. The line cut, and she stood in silence. The ship's hull trembled softly as they entered hyperspace. Stars stretched into streaks, and time blurred. But Yelena remained still, a statue of vengeance, a harbinger of the storm to come. Her mind drifted, unbidden, to a name whispered in the dark. Baba Yaga. It had started as a joke among Earth's enemies, a fairy tale from human folklore, the witch of the woods, the deathless woman. But legends evolve. After Mars burned and the Orion insurrection was silenced, the name had taken on new meaning. She became the specter children feared, the executioner of worlds. No one truly knew what she was capable of. And now, neither would the Empire. When the ship emerged from hyperspace, the Terran fleet was waiting. Hundreds of stealth vessels, their hulls matte black, bristling with weapons Earth had kept hidden for decades. Above the crescent curve of the homeworld, the ships formed a silent, watchful formation, like wolves before a hunt. Yelena disembarked, greeted by a cadre of silent soldiers. They saluted her, eyes hard with understanding. None of them needed speeches. They knew what had happened. They knew what was coming. A young officer approached, eyes wide with something close to awe. Ambassador Vostrikov, ma'am. We weren't sure you'd survive. She looked him over, noted the tension in his shoulders, the fear behind the eyes. I didn't. He blinked. She walked past him without another word. The war had already begun. In the war room of Luna Base, holographic projections lit the walls, outlining battle plans, enemy fleet movements, key targets. General Kessler and the High Command observed in silence as Yelena entered, her presence halting all conversation. Kessler gestured toward the largest projection, a star map, with systems lighting up red. The Empire's borders. We strike fast, hit key nodes, supply chains, relay stations, command outposts. Yelena stepped closer, eyes tracing the lines, the connections, the weaknesses. No, she said quietly. We hit their heart. We kill their will to fight before the war even begins. Kessler frowned. Too risky. We need build-up momentum. She turned, her voice sharp as broken glass. They've seen me bleed. They think I'm gone. Let them believe it. Let them lower their guard. And then we break them. The room fell silent. Slowly, the general nodded. Plan it your way. Yelena stared at the map, eyes narrowing. Good. Because I already have. As she left the room, orders already transmitting across secure channels. Yelena felt a strange stillness settle over her. Not peace, never peace, but purpose, clarity. The Empire had tried to kill the woman. Now they would meet the Baba Yaga, and she had come for blood. The dropship shuddered violently as it broke atmosphere, slipping through the sulfuric clouds of Virek Prime. Lightning forked across the crimson sky, illuminating jagged peaks and blackened wastelands below. Inside the vessel, silence reigned, not from fear, but from discipline. Yelena Vostrikov stood near the ramp, one gloved hand resting on a magnetic harness, her eyes fixed on the chaos outside. Her armor, matte black with crimson insignia, seemed to absorb the flickering light. Around her, the elite strike team, the Revenants, prepared for insertion with surgical precision. No chatter, no hesitation. These were soldiers bred for one purpose: deliver death with efficiency. Sergeant Malik, tall and gaunt with eyes like polished obsidian, approached her side, his voice low. Orbital scans confirm target is in the central citadel. Empire's high command sector. Heavy defenses, anti-air batteries, kinetic shields. Suicide for a standard assault. Yelena didn't blink. We're not standard. Malik hesitated, then nodded. 2 minutes to drop. All units green. She turned toward the squad. 12 warriors, faceless behind their helms, stared back at her. She spoke only 2 words. No survivors. The ramp hissed open, revealing the screaming winds and ash-choked sky of Vyrek Prime. The Revenants moved as one, leaping into the void, their forms swallowed by the storm. Yelena was last, diving headfirst, the wind tearing at her like claws. She felt nothing. As they fell, anti-air fire streaked upward, bolts of molten light slicing the darkness. 2 Revenants were hit mid-descent, silent flashes, no screams. The rest continued, guided by coordinated neural links and adaptive camouflage. Yelena activated her visor overlay, the world shifting into sharp contrast, targets highlighted, trajectories mapped in real time. The citadel loomed below, an obsidian monolith crowned with spires of bone-like metal, surrounded by crackling defense grids. The heart of the Empire's regional command. Yelena landed hard on the outer platform, rolling into a crouch, plasma bolts skimming past her head. Her rifle was in her hands before her feet touched metal, and she fired without hesitation. A guard crumpled, his head a molten ruin. Another turned, too slow, and Yelena was already moving, a blur of violence and precision. Her blade flashed, a mono-edged fong of nanocarbon, severing limbs and ending lives with silent finality. Inside the citadel, alarms howled. Imperial forces swarmed the corridors, armored in gold and crimson, wielding weapons designed to intimidate and destroy. They found only death. The Revenants moved like shadows, precise and merciless, flowing through hallways and chambers, leaving bodies in their wake. Yelena led them, her mind sharp, her senses heightened. Every heartbeat, every footstep was calculated. Her past life, the diplomat, the negotiator, was gone. Only the assassin remained. They reached the command chamber in 11 minutes. 11 minutes to cut through layers of soldiers, turrets, and security systems. The final blast door loomed ahead, sealed and reinforced. "Breacher," Yelena ordered. Sergeant Malik stepped forward, affixing a shaped charge. A moment's pause, then detonation. The door erupted inward, smoke billowing. They stormed in. High Warlord Dresk, commander of the Vyrek sector, stood frozen behind his war table, flanked by guards. His expression twisted from disbelief to fury as Yelena entered, weapon raised. "You," he snarled, reaching for his blade. "They said you were dead." Yelena's bullet punched through his skull before he could draw. The guards barely had time to react before the Revenants tore through them, a flurry of fire and steel. Silence again. The chamber reeked of ozone and blood. Yelena stepped to the war table, accessing its interface. Data streamed across her visor, fleet movements, supply routes, encryption keys. She uploaded everything. Malik approached, his voice low. "Intel secured. Command confirmed secondary objective." She nodded. "Demolish the citadel." As the Revenants planted charges, Yelena lingered over Dresk's corpse. Her eyes were hard, unreadable. Another name crossed off the list. They exfiltrated just before the blast. From a nearby ridge, Yelena watched the citadel erupt, a column of fire and debris piercing the storm. The Empire's hold on Virek Prime shattered in seconds. Back aboard the Nemesis, Yelena stood in the war room, reviewing the next target. Across the table, General Kessler's hologram flickered. "Your results are beyond expectations," he said, voice tight. "The Empire's losing ground. Morale is crumbling." She didn't respond. Kessler hesitated. "There's concern among the Council that your methods are unconventional." Yelena's eyes locked onto his. "They tried to erase us with a single strike. They thought we'd bow, beg for mercy. There's only one language they understand." Kessler exhaled slowly. "We just received intel. Tormek is consolidating power, pulling forces to the core worlds. He's preparing for a decisive strike." Her gaze darkened. "Good. Let him. I'm going to break him in front of his throne." Later, alone in her quarters, Yelena stood before a steel wall etched with names. Names of the Earth delegation, slaughtered in the Empire's ambush. Friends, allies, people who believed diplomacy could prevent war. She traced her fingers over the name Ambassador Lien Shun, her last conversation still echoing. "You can't win with fear, Yelena. There's always another way." Yelena's jaw clenched. Her way was the only way now. The door chimed. Malik entered, saluting. "We've located Tormek's forward base. Planet Delos 4. Light defenses. He's moving fast, reckless." Yelena turned, eyes glinting. "Prepare the revenants. We end this." As the Nemesis surged into hyperspace, Yelena watched the stars stretch and blur, her heart a forge of cold fury. The Empire had wanted war. Now they would choke on it. The Los 4 burned beneath an emerald sky, its atmosphere igniting where orbital bombardments raked across the landscape. The Empire's forward base, a sprawling fortress of black stone and energy pylons, lay embedded in the planet's equatorial ridge. It pulsed with the lifeblood of war. Troop transports lifting off, artillery booming, fighters screaming overhead. But above it all, watching from the edge of the upper atmosphere, hovered Nemesis, silent, unseen. Yelena stood on the bridge, staring down at the world below. Her arms were crossed, posture rigid, but her eyes moved constantly, scanning the displays. Every sensor ping, every tactical report, every minute fluctuation, it all flowed through her mind like threads in a web. At her side, Sergeant Malik waited for her order, one hand resting lightly on his rifle sling. "Tormek is down there," Malik said quietly, his voice stripped of anything but focus. "Scans confirm his personal dreadnought landed 6 hours ago. Defenses are light, too light." Yelena nodded. "He's baiting us. Wants to draw me in." Malik glanced at her. "He thinks we'll walk into a trap." "He's right." Her voice was ice, but not in the way he expects. She turned from the viewport, striding toward the command console. With a flick of her hand, a detailed layout of the enemy base materialized, a tangled labyrinth of corridors, landing pads, and power conduits. At its heart, the central command dome, Tormek's lair. "This isn't a surgical strike," Yelena said, addressing the revenants assembled on the bridge. "This is an execution. We breach, we cripple, we display as failure for every system to witness. No delays, no prisoners." She paused, letting her words sink in. Each soldier stared back, helmets in hand, their faces impassive, eyes honed by years of war. They didn't question her. They never did. Malik stepped forward. "We hit them in 60. Yelena reached for her sidearm, locking it into place at her hip. Her blade followed, lightweight, razor-thin, humming with barely restrained energy. "Tormek believes he's the predator," she said, voice low. "Let's remind him what it means to be hunted." The drop was swift, violent. The atmosphere clawed at their descent pods, sheathing them in fire as they streaked through the sky. Yelena's pod struck ground like a meteor, the impact cracking the reinforced platform. The door blasted open. She was moving before the smoke cleared. The outer perimeter erupted in chaos. Empire troops scrambled, caught between confusion and terror as revenants emerged from the flames, cutting them down in precise, brutal sweeps. Yelena led the charge through the breach, every step driving them deeper into the heart of the base. Alarms wailed. Gunfire lit the corridors like strobe lights, disorienting and furious. Yelena moved like death given form, fluid and relentless. Her blade carved through armor and bone. Her pistol barked with mechanical precision. No wasted motion, no hesitation. She didn't kill for rage or vengeance. She killed because the mission demanded it, because peace would only rise from the ashes of the Empire. Through her visor, she tracked Tormek's signal. He was stationary, deep within the command dome, waiting. Malik's voice crackled over comms. Central defenses are folding. He's locking down. Let him. Yelena's breathing didn't change. Seal the exits. No one leaves. They reached the inner sanctum in 27 minutes. The great doors loomed ahead, armored plates 6 feet thick, humming with energy fields. A final barrier. Yelena stepped forward, planted a charge, and detonated. The blast wave flattened the immediate corridor. Smoke and fire roared outward, but she stepped through unflinching, her silhouette stark against the flames. Inside, Tormek stood upon a raised dais, draped in imperial regalia, flanked by elite guards in obsidian armor. His face twisted in a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "So, the great Baba Yaga graces me with her presence," he sneered. "You've cost me much, Terran. Blood, resources, entire systems." Yelena didn't respond. She raised her pistol, firing twice. The guards fell. Tormek's eyes widened, and for the first time, fear crept into his voice. "You can't kill me. I'm the heart of the Empire. Strike me down, and 1,000 will rise." Yelena advanced, steps slow, deliberate. "No, Chancellor, I'm not here to kill you." She holstered her weapon, stepping onto the dais. Her hand shot out, gripping his throat, lifting him off the ground with impossible strength. "I'm here to show them what happens when you cross humanity." He struggled, clawing at her armor, gasping. His eyes bulged, veins pulsing in his forehead. Yelena activated her comm broadcast. Malik's voice responded immediately. "Channel open. Every system. Every world." She stared into Tormek's eyes, cold and unrelenting. "You tried to assassinate a diplomat. You murdered my people. You brought war to Earth." Her voice echoed across the stars, transmitted to billions. "This is your reckoning." With a flick of her wrist, she flung Tormek to the ground. He gasped, coughing, hands trembling. Yelena drew her blade. "This is the price of your arrogance." The broadcast cut to static. The blade fell. When the revenants emerged from the command dome, dragging Tormek's lifeless body, the base was in ruins. The Empire's forces had surrendered or fled, they were shattered. Above them, the Nemesis hovered, a sentinel in the storm. Yelena stood atop the citadel's highest spire, staring into the void. The wind howled around her, carrying the scent of ash and victory. Below, a transmission echoed across the galaxy, an image of Tormek's broken body, Earth's flag planted beside him. The message was clear. Humanity would not kneel. It would rise, and it would conquer. The war should have ended with Tormek's death. That was the belief whispered across the fractured remains of the Galactic Empire as the broadcast of his execution spread system by system, sparking riots, mutinies, mass defections. Entire fleets abandoned their posts. Leaders surrendered, hoping for clemency. The heart of the Empire had been torn out, and its blood was leaking into the stars. But the corpse of an empire rarely stays still. In the days following the Los 4, a storm of retaliation began to swell. rogue admirals rallying loyalists, fringe warlords seizing power vacuums, extremist factions calling for the annihilation of Earth in Tormek's name. The collapse did not come in silence. It came with fire. Yelena Vostrikov stood at the heart of it all, watching the inevitable from the bridge of the Nemesis. The ship drifted above the ruins of the Los 4, now quarantined by a Terran blockade. Fires still burned in the lower hemisphere, a dying world beneath a dead regime. Her eyes were locked on a star chart, systems blinking red one by one. The western fringe is holding, Malik reported, his face grim under the harsh lighting. But the core worlds, they're arming. Tormek's lieutenants have named you Heretic Queen. They're calling for crusade. Yelena said nothing. She had expected this. The moment she'd chosen to broadcast the execution, she had made herself a symbol. Not just a soldier. Not just a Baba Yaga. Something more dangerous. A target. How many ships? She asked. Malik hesitated. Unknown. Estimates suggest thousands. Their main fleets moving toward Sol. A flicker of tension cracked across the bridge. Sol, the heart of humanity's resurgence. Earth, Mars, the lunar stations, the Terran defense array. Billions of lives. Yelena turned slowly to face the war table, fingers trailing over the holographic controls. A plan began to form, precise and cold. She didn't hesitate. Hesitation was for those who could afford it. We strike first, she said. Malik's brow furrowed. You want to take the fight to them? Now. They expect us to defend. Hide behind Sol's defenses. We don't. We cut the head from what remains of their leadership before the fleets converge. One strike. Fast. Surgical. Malik processed this. He didn't question her logic. He never had. But she could see the wear in his eyes. The weight of unending war. They won't expect it, he finally said. They won't survive it. Preparation was swift. The revenants gathered in silence, their faces taut with exhaustion. Resolve burned into their bones. They had followed her through blood, ash, and void. And they would follow her now, into the jaws of a dying beast. The target, Aurella's prime, deep within core world territory. Once a shining jewel of the Empire, now a fortress, housing the last of Tormek's inner circle. Admirals, strategists, high lords who had built their power on the backs of enslaved systems. Intelligence suggested they were gathering, consolidating command, preparing the final assault. Yelena didn't give them the chance. The Nemesis tore into orbit without warning, its stealth systems deactivated, shields at full power, declaring war not with words, but presence. Surface defenses screamed to life, but they were too slow, too primitive. The revenants deployed in pods of fire, cutting through the stratosphere like knives. Yelena landed in the central plaza, the impact cracking ferrocrete beneath her boots. Her squad fanned out, neutralizing targets with ruthless precision. Civilians scattered. Sirens howled. She moved through the chaos like a blade through silk. Inside the central spire, resistance was heavier. Automated turrets, plasma grids, shock troopers. But none of it mattered. She was a storm. Her blade flashed, her pistol barked, and every second brought her closer to the command nexus. They breached the high chamber 39 minutes after insertion. 8 men and women waited inside, garbed in finery, desperation etched into every line of their faces. Yelena strode in, stepping over the bodies of their guards, her armor scorched, her eyes alight with cold fire. One of them, a gaunt woman with silver implants, raised a shaking hand. We surrender. You don't have to. Yelena's pistol shot cracked through the chamber, dropping her mid-sentence. The others lunged, begged, screamed. She silenced them all. In under 2 minutes, the high command was gone. Yelena stood amidst the wreckage, her breath slow, measured. Blood stained the marble floor beneath her boots. Outside the windows, the world burned anew, the sky choked with smoke. Malik's voice echoed in her calms. Fleet reports all targets neutralized. Aurella's prime is ours. She stared out across the cityscape. A once proud metropolis, now a smoldering ruin. Initiate broadcast. Yelena. Malik hesitated. It's done. They're broken. No, she said quietly. Not yet. A moment later, her voice filled the void again, reaching the surviving fragments of the Empire, reaching humanity's allies, enemies, and those still undecided. This was your final chance. Your leaders are dead. Your fleets will never reach Sol. Surrender, or be forgotten. She deactivated the channel. Outside, the sun broke through the smoke, a crimson light bathing the devastation. She watched it, silent. Hours later, aboard Nemesis, Yelena entered her quarters. The door hissed shut behind her. The room was Spartan, save for a single wall, etched with names, each carved by her hand. She added 8 more. She sat, finally still. The war wasn't over, not truly. There would be skirmishes, uprisings, the slow work of rebuilding. But the tide had turned. Humanity would not merely survive. It would shape the stars, and Yelena Vostrikov, the Baba Yaga, would haunt them forever.